From the very beginning of the story of God in the Bible, God has been using leaders to lead his people. Sometimes we think that if we need a leader that we're immature or that somehow we're dropping the ball, but God has always used leaders from Moses to Joshua to David and Saul to the prophets to his apostles, Peter, James, and John, and then later after that, Paul and then Timothy, and then they were to appoint leaders who are to appoint leaders. So God's plan has always been to use leaders. Leaders are critical to the success of any organization, and the church, even as a family, needs leaders. There's a pastor in the States named Craig Groeschel, who's leader of a multi-site church, I think 27 different locations in seven different states or some crazy thing. And he says this, he says, when a leader gets better, everyone gets better. And I couldn't agree more, which is why I want to introduce Manifest Church Leadership Essentials to you. Manifest Church Leadership Essentials is the beginning of a leadership pathway or a leadership track that we're bringing to our leadership teams so that every leader will have an opportunity to build a foundation and grow as a leader. Now, if you're going to lead in Manifest, there are 4 foundational truths or ideas that you need to get your head around. And I want to talk about those in this video. And the first of these pillars or these foundational concepts is structure. So even though we're a fairly new church, there's actually a structure to what we do. And the words we use to describe various leaders are things you need to know so that you know what we're referring to and what to call yourself and what to call other people in this leadership pathway. So Manifest is led by pastors and elders. So I, as the pastor, am accountable to a group of elders, and together as a team, we direct and protect the vision and mission of Manifest. Manifest is accountable to the Mennonite Brethren Church of Canada and the C2C church planting network within that. But on a ground level, pastors and elders are the spiritual leaders of the church. That doesn't mean that we do all the work, though. And so we also talk about coaches. Coaches provide support and direction and accountability for leaders and teachers. And so in Manifest Kids, we've got a leader that's taking care of Manifest Kids. And part of that role, a major part of that role, is leading the leaders who are doing the teaching. So that's what a coach does. Now, a coach, like I said, provides support for leaders. People who lead ministry teams to accomplish their mission. That's how we define a leader at Manifest. Someone who is leading a ministry team to accomplish a mission that is serving the wider mission of Manifest. All leaders, in turn, are looking to develop apprentices, people with possibilities and potential that they can officially invite to be in training to become leaders themselves. Now, within that, we also have team members, which are the actual people who serve on ministry teams, and helpers, which are people who help teachers in particular. So in that kids ministry vein, we have leaders who are leading their helper to accomplish the mission of that team, which is to teach children on a Sunday morning and show them Jesus and everything that Manifest Kids is all about. So that's the structure in a nutshell and some of the words that we use to describe it. The second foundational concept is what we call a 2-2 view. And this is based on 2 scriptures that are chapter 2, verse 2. And the first one of these is 1 Peter 2, verse 2, where Peter is encouraging his people that he's mentoring. He says, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation. So here's this idea that we want everybody growing to maturity, not just stagnating. We want to have a culture of growing and growing and growing. And part of this is that some people will emerge as leaders. So the second 2:2 verse is found in 2 Timothy 2, verse 2. And this is spoken by Paul, another one of the apostles. And he says to his protege, a leader that he had apprenticed and then appointed as a leader, he said, the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. So this 2-2 view includes a growth mindset that everyone needs to be growing up and ministry should be growing. We should be maturing. We should be getting better. And the second piece is that we should be replacing ourselves or multiplying leaders. In other words, we're talking about a culture of leadership development, not just a program. Now, in this verse, you can see an amazing thing taking place. First of all, Paul says, "You heard me say things to you, Timothy." He says, well, those things I want you to share with reliable people who will be able to teach others. So this is a fourth generation view. A 2-2 view means I want to empower someone who can empower someone who can empower someone. That's the kind of culture that we're trying to develop here at Manifest. Now, the third foundational principle I want to introduce to you is something we call the loop, what every team and every leader needs to provide for the people that work with the team. And it goes like this: vetting, training, and feedback. And then once you've vetted someone, they're in the loop, then it's training and feedback, training and feedback, training and feedback. Why? Because when leaders get better, everyone gets better. And if we help our people get better, we'll be better and better at accomplishing the mission that God has given us. First of all, vetting. Every team needs to have a process that helps determine whether a potential team member fits and meets the requirements for serving in that role. For example, let's say that somebody is interested in serving with the worship team. Maybe they want to sing or they want to play guitar or drums. How do we know whether that person should or could be part of that worship team? That's where vetting comes in. Now, vetting has 4 different kind of components here at Manifest. The first one, especially when it comes to worship teams, is the faith and character filter. In other words, do they have a living relationship with Jesus? Are they a person of integrity? Are they teachable? Now, not every role in Manifest requires that someone have a living relationship with Jesus. Sometimes you could just be new, or you could be someone who's just checking out faith and you can still help out, you can set up, all that stuff. But some of these roles within Manifest really do require a living faith. And all of them would require a certain amount of character, so we know we can depend on the person that wants to get involved. The vetting process is going to help us determine whether they should serve or not. The second one is skill. In other words, do they have the skills and or giftedness the role requires? So for worship teams, this is obvious. Are they skilled at an instrument? Or are they skilled in singing? Even if it were a setup team, do they have a strong back? So skill is the second one. Third, we talk about commitment. Can they commit to what's required to succeed in this role? Are they willing to take lessons to learn to play the guitar better? Are they willing to do what it takes to take their vocal range to the next level, or learn how to facilitate a conversation with children, or whatever it is for whatever role? Can they commit? We have a 1 in 3 rotation of Manifest where you're 1 on, 2 off. Can they commit to that? That's really important. And then the fourth one is equally important, and that is their personality. So do they get along with others? Can they play well with others? Is how they're wired a fit for this role? If they're super, super nervous about being in front of people all the time, maybe being up front is not the thing for them. So those 4 things, if someone can kind of get a positive or a green light in all 4 of those areas, or they're willing to learn the skills, well, then the vetting process has worked, and we may move them along to becoming part of the worship team. Now, there's a process that they need to go through to get there, but that's the example that I want to give you. So every team needs a vetting process. Number 2, every team needs training. So every team must have a process for onboarding and equipping people to succeed in their roles. In other words, you don't just throw somebody into the wolves. What's my job? How do I know what I'm supposed to do? So to succeed in their roles, people generally need a few things. First of all, they need clarity about what they're supposed to do and what they can do about what they're allowed to do about what they're supposed to do, and then what success in that role might look like. So not just do this task. What's the mission? What am I supposed to be aiming at? And do I have freedom to try things to get to that same result? So that's the first one. And number 2, they need training. This is something they need initially to get onboarded, but then in an ongoing way. Again, because as the leader gets better, everyone gets better. And as everyone gets better, the team gets better, and we are more successful in accomplishing our mission. So we need to develop skills that we're going to need to succeed in the mission that God's given us. And then number 3, they need access to and familiarity with any resources necessary to succeed in their role. If they're a sound person, they need to know their way around the soundboard. First of all, we have a general training. This is for any worker or ministry team member, helpers, teachers, all of that. We all have a general training, which is the onboarding training. And in this, we've got videos that you can access online where you can learn about manifest essentials, our covenant, and our confession of faith is manifest. So that's the first part of onboarding. Everyone that gets involved needs to go through the onboarding training. And the second piece is team-specific training or gatherings offered by the leader. In other words, there might be specific training for worship teams, specific training for understanding how to do setup or takedown, how to pack the trailer, or how to lead a discussion with children that builds on the onboarding training that you've already received. And then, like I mentioned, ongoing feedback for how you're doing. And then there's annual Make It Better Summit, where we gather every worker, every helper, every leader in Manifest, and we talk about how to make it better. How can we do what we do better? So that happens annually, and everybody who's involved in any kind of capacity needs to make that a priority and come for that. Leaders and coaches also have a training track, and this is the beginning of it. You're listening to it. But this leadership track is going to develop, and there'll be more and more material over time, because again, when the leader gets better, we all get better. So the second piece is that I want every leader and every coach to listen to a leadership podcast. I would highly recommend, my number one recommendation is a Craig Groeschel leadership podcast. It comes out once a month. It's probably like 23 minutes. It's not long. You can listen to it on your ride to work. And it's just fantastic. Another good one is Andy Stanley's leadership podcast. But I want every leader having something injected into their system at least once a month that is helping them become a better leader from somebody who's a better leader than I'll ever be. And then 3 times a year, we will have leaders summits, like a half a day, that kind of thing. 3 times a year where we're going to talk vision, mission, pray together, learn together, evaluate. And these are essential for creating the kind of team culture that we're trying to build at Manifest. And then third, every team needs to be giving feedback. So remember the loop? We're on the loop still. So there's onboarding or there's vetting, and then there's training, and then there's feedback. So everyone needs to be given immediate, helpful feedback, both to affirm what they're doing right and then to help anybody understand how they can improve, because we want to make it better. So that's the third one. The fourth foundational concept that I want to introduce to you is something that we call the sandbox. We want people to move past just buy-in, which implies being sold something, to actually taking ownership for their role within Manifest, ownership for the mission of Manifest. And so the sandbox concept, what it does is it provides enough structure to preserve our mission and vision while empowering people to play and then make things their own within the guidelines that are given. So the idea is this. We have kind of a sandbox that you can play in that's limited by certain constraints, but within that sandbox, feel free to have fun. And what we mean by play is this. This is the place where you as a leader get to decide how to spend the money that's been allocated to you, to make decisions that are good for your team, to make things better, to improve things. You don't have to ask permission to make things better, to try new approaches, that kind of thing. So we really want people to own their role, especially as leaders. Without a well-defined sandbox, people can't truly take ownership. So what are those constraints so that you know what the sandbox actually looks like? First, we're going to talk about the team mission and values within the larger mission. In other words, you can't decide that you can do something that takes you off the rails with your team that is contrary to the mission and values of Manifest. Is it simple? Is it organic? Is it reproducible? Is it revolutionary? If it is, go for it. That's one of the great parts of this sandbox analogy is once you understand what the limitations are, you can then have fun with it after that. So the team mission and values is one constraint. Another one is accountability. In other words, nobody gets to make decisions that are disconnected from everything. We're all accountable to somebody, and we're actually accountable to other teams' needs. So it's great for me to go, you know what, I think I need to add 10 minutes to every message, and the Sunday morning experience is going to be 10 minutes longer, except that impacts everybody, especially the kids, people that are working upstairs going, 10 more minutes? How are we going to fill 10 more minutes? So I can't just make decisions that affect other people without consulting them and stuff. So we're accountable to each other in that way. The third are related to resources. In other words, staying within our budget, using the people that we have, the equipment that we've been given. All of that is important, right? We can't just spend something we don't have permission to spend. The fourth one is your coach or your leader or the pastors or elders or whatever may have specific parameters that we need to live within for a season or special directives, specific things that we need to keep in mind as we pursue a project. And so all of these things, what they do is they help us understand how to make decisions and how to own it. So within all of those things, if you're accountable and you're living within your resources and you're marching with those specific parameters and you're working under the team mission and values, sometimes the how can change depending on who's in the loop. So we've gone through the structure of Manifest. We've talked about the 2-2 view. We've talked about the loop, and we've talked about the sandbox. That, in a nutshell, is what Manifest Church Leadership Essentials are all about. And we'll build on these concepts in the next video.